Well, I'll start recording. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to our monthly office hours. These are the meetings we hold in between our Wayside Cleanup Advisory Committee meetings on the same date, the fourth Thursday of the month. As you see, Paul has graced us with his presence. So I appreciate Paul attending. Paul and I, our status of our positions is still the same as it was, toward the end of last year. We're both remain in our acting roles. My role as acting assistant commissioner and Paul acting deputy commissioner. In terms of, we were just talking before some of you joined about back to work and the status of the office and all of that. As we mentioned in January at the Wayside Cleanup Advisory Committee, DEP's offices have now opened their lobbies, so people can come and drop off packages, that sort of things, but we haven't yet opened up the offices for any kind of public meetings or meeting with the public. So that's still a developing situation, and we have, however, returned to a hybrid work model. So starting the beginning of the year, DEP staff are coming into the office at least one day a week, in some cases more. The other thing that's consuming a lot of our time in the Boston office is that we're going to be giving up the lease at 1 Winter Street and moving into 100 Cambridge Street where EEA is located, and in the process of getting ready for that move, we're reducing our files because we won't be able to be carrying all our paper files with us. So we're in the process of scanning and archiving those, as well as just generally getting ready for that move. Another thing we were discussing early on before some of you joined was hiring, and how we're finding hiring a challenge currently. I think that's true of everyone. It's true for Wayside Cleanup and for the department in general, that we're spending a lot of our time hiring. When we do hire, we have people moving between positions, and then that in turn creates some new gaps for positions to be filled. A lot of it is driven by having so many people at retirement age within the department. So we have that issue as well. So that really is has been consuming a lot of time in Wayside Cleanup, in both our Boston office and the regional office. In terms of the MCP status, I don't have any update or change in status to report. I hope we will have that next time we meet. At the last meeting, Paul did a presentation about the soil disposal capacity issues. He did a recap of that listening session that was held in December, I think. And our internal working group is going to be meeting on that topic tomorrow. I don't know, Paul, do you want to add anything on that?
So in addition to kind of the listening session in December, there have also been various groups, and you guys know who you are, who have continually been raising the issue about capacity in a variety of different contexts, kind of up the chain, including to the commissioner's office. So we've met with other groups, companies, people that have wanted to express their concern about capacity and the effect it's having on development, to the powers that be. So I just want to kind of reinforce that the department is focused on it, and looking at what we can do in the short term, and we hope soon to be able to at least kind of take some baby steps in improving capacity for soil management, doing what we can do with the realization that it is a much bigger issue and there's no silver bullet to it. So if you're expecting like a resolution and suddenly there'll be places to bring somewhat contaminated soil in the short term with no limits on capacity, that's probably not going to happen. But I think we can begin working around the edges, and there are a couple ideas that people had suggested that could have more substantial impacts, but it's going to take a little bit more time, both changes in regulation and changes in kind of policy and practice. So, but to let you know, we are still focused on it.
Just a few more items to mention. We continue to spend a lot of our time working on PFAS sites. In waste site cleanup, this has meant doing follow-up work from results of private and public well sampling, including doing additional sampling when we get detections in private wells and looking at nearby wells, providing bottled water and installation of POET systems in cases of imminent hazards, and just additional work following up on in PRP-led investigations and that sort of thing. The legislative task force report is not out yet, but we still expect it soon. Paul might know a little bit more on that than I do. And in terms of just the updated information, there's been a bit more progress made since January when we looked at the numbers in terms of the testing, but I'll share my screen and show you the updated numbers. So in terms of the public water supply testing, we're now at 990 public water supplies, both community and non-community, having been tested out of the 1,468 that are required to test. In terms of community water supplies, nearly all of them have been tested for PFAS at 99%. And the results to date, 95% of people being served by public water supply are drinking water that meets the PFAS 6 MCL. 97 public water supplies, community and non-community, are or have previously provided their customers with water that exceeded the drinking water standard. And as you all probably know, we have a story map as well as a data portal where you can look at this information yourself. This is just a screenshot of that story map in terms of public water supply information. These numbers are a little bit behind what I just presented to you because this, I think, is getting updated monthly at this point. In terms of the private water supply sampling program, this, as you know, has been offered to 85 communities where more than 60% of their residents are served by private wells. 4,247 homeowners have applied to have their wells sampled. That's up about 130 from January. And to date, 1,462 have been sampled or are now in the process of being sampled. And the results from those 947 show that 94% of those private well users have levels of PFAS below the drinking water standard. To date, we've had 5 eminent hazards reported through this program, although I think in total, Wayside Cleanup Program has seen more eminent hazard detections when it comes to sampling nearby private wells around the ones that are triggering eminent hazards through this private well sampling program. And so the trends have been kind of very consistent over time. You still have, 94% of the wells meeting or below the MCL. And that's all I had on that. I think, check my notes. So that's all I had in terms of our updates. So I'll just stop now for any questions or any additional issues anyone would like to raise, questions you'd like to pose to us. Wendy, see a hand.
Hi. I prefer the actual hand to the avatar. Anyway, thank you for that. I had a few follow-up questions. One, with regard to the legislative PFAS task force, do you have any idea if they're planning to take their show on the road after the report is released? Or is it more likely that we would get, a copy of the report and, an update from Wayside Cleanup or another state agency?
Paul, do you know about any plans for outreach?
So my, I am as much of an observer to this as most of you as well. I think the primary audience for the task force report, kind of putting yourselves in their view, is that it's the legislature gathering information and putting together a report for the rest of the legislature to help guide them in kind of their development of policies and strategies and legislation that will take on PFAS. I believe, and I think it's less, for the general public. So I rather doubt that the task force itself will then be going on the road. For that, I think it will greatly inform the overall legislative process. Having said that, once the report is public, everybody will be able have a copy of it, will be able to see it, and I'm sure if there was interest in kind of discussing what's in there, in forums like this or otherwise, informally, we could do that. Keeping in mind that DEP is not the author of that, so I don't think we could be put in a position where we're trying to kind of explain or describe, what's in there any more than any other, casual reader of it. So I think we'll, take a look at it when it comes out, and then it will be a question of, how that information can then be used, certainly for DEP policy, but I think most of it is really geared towards the legislative process.
Okay, great. And I guess I would put in a plug for discussion, depending on obviously on what it says, but I'm guessing that there might be, I know there are several bills in the legislature about, obviously about on PFAS issues that might influence, but I'm always curious about if the legislature is going to ask the state regulatory agencies to do anything. And that's, I think, the area where, it might most, immediately impact Wayside Cleanup.
And I think that's, that would work its way through, in the form of legislation.
Right.
So I'm sure there will probably be some recommendations that would say that, okay, DEP
promulgate something.
Promulgate regulations to address this. DPH promulgate regulations to that.
Right.
DOT promulgate road use. I don't.
Right,
All the
right,
same.
right. Then great to hear that you guys are meeting internally about soil capacity. That's fantastic. Do you still expect that there would be a external stakeholder meeting after that sometime to share those, some, whatever you can share about those discussions and try to move things forward a little bit?
Yes.
Great. So that's still in the plan.
Yeah. If you know, to let you guys know what, you know, what we think we can do in the short term, and if assuming that we're going to also be looking at medium and long-term issues, we need to kind of lay the groundwork for that, which will include involvement in the private sector.
Right. Great. I think that's it for me.
Thanks, Wendy.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
Ooh. Quiet.
I haven't seen either of you quoted in the newspaper about the Proctor House situation. You stayed away from that?
The what situation?
Proctor House? House with an leaky oil tank.
Oh,
yeah.
The Wareham couple.
Wareham, thank you.
Actually, I did hear that there was supposed to be something in the newspaper today, but it got postponed.
There's other news today.
Yes, there is other news.
we did provide them with some numbers, but no quotes.
And we have the data, the annual reports on the homeowner oil spills and the insurance on our website, right, Liz? Somewhere?
No, we don't have those on. So we, under the rule, we provide an annual report to the legislature on the number of homeowner spills. And we incorporate into that report information that we're given from the Division of Insurance on how many purchases of coverage there are annually. So that's an ongoing obligation we have to provide that report, but we have not posted those online.
You would think with all the bad press that you see on these disasters, people would reach out to their agent and buy the insurance. It's so disappointing.
We have seen in the past 2 years, and I think this started, we associate it with the press coverage from a couple of years ago when there was a series done on local news, but we have seen an increase in insurance purchases. I think overall, over time, it's the total coverage has gone down, but it has picked up in the last couple of years. So it's having an effect, but there's still many people who are without coverage and don't know it until something happens.
Liz, this is Matt. Have you seen any indication, or has Department of Insurance given any indication that people like mortgage lenders are requiring this of mortgagees, or in maybe for new properties or something, that this is somehow becoming like part of the normal course of property ownership?
I haven't heard that. Wendy, have you heard anything like that? I know the LSPA has been following this pretty closely.
No, we haven't heard that, although the LSPA did meet a few years ago with the banking commissioner for the state who knew nothing about this. We tried to get a little traction there, but nothing happened. I would say, Matt, that, most new homes are not using oil. Of course, that doesn't mean that old homes won't be sold and there won't be mortgages needed, but the stories that we hear are mostly that, home inspectors aren't necessarily to be relied on for this expertise, and that banks and realtors aren't playing so much of a role. The LSPA has reached out to the Association of Realtors actually just this week to see if we can get a little support from them.
You would think with social media, how fast it can spread misinformation, that you could get the word out to everybody, that you can avoid this situation with simple insurance purchase.
You would think.
I agree. I think it should be like my old office was in the floodplain of the Sudbury River. I had to get flood insurance. I had no choice. It should be similar for this, you know, that if you have an oil tank, the lender is going to say you need to get X type of insurance.
Yeah, and
I don't think we can rely on the legislature for resolution, just given it's been since 2003 we started this effort, and still the problems are reoccurring.
I don't agree with you, Elliot. I think that there is increasing awareness of this with each of these news stories, and we've had legislators reach out to us, new folks who we haven't spoken with before. So, you know, I'm hopeful that that is one way. I mean, there are a lot of different fronts, right? There's public awareness, and there are, you know, home inspectors and banks and legislation and all of that. And I think we got to go on all of them. The LSPA fielded several phone calls already this week from homeowners who wanted to get more information about the law. So we've been sending links to the law that they can then use to show their insurance brokers that in fact insurance has to be available. A lot of insurance brokers don't actually even know about this. We've heard stories from many LSPs who've asked for the insurance and have had to convince their brokers that in fact it exists. So, you know, there are a lot of parties involved, and everyone, you know, needs to be doing a better job. But I'm hopeful.
We were hopeful last time. I mean, you're fighting the insurance lobby.
Right, they're the only
That's
ones.
a tough thing. Right?
They're the only ones, and their arguments have not been particularly strong.
My opinion is it should be like car rental insurance, where you have to, you know, specifically deny the coverage. And I think, you know, a lot of people may be going to insurers, and if they don't bring this particular, you know, aspect up, you know, people will just purchase insurance. You know, most people are not, I think, savvy enough to really look through all the insurance documents and really, you know, understand what they're purchasing.
Right.
Carol, you're patiently having your hand raised.
Sorry,
Is it
Carol.
on this topic, or?
I did both. I did the virtual and the actual, but no, I wanted to also have you think about taking another angle on this, which is also promoting replacing a tank. I mean, there's some people that just can't have gas. I mean, we have a super long driveway. We can't afford to put the gas down the driveway. So we have to have oil in on our particular location. But the double wall tank is the way to go. There's homeowner double wall tanks. I just convinced my 93-year-old father, who had a tank basically older than me. Trust me, that's pretty old.
That's a 30-year-old tank.
I mean, it was at least 39, honestly. No, he really, and so if he can replace a tank, I mean, it was like, and it was in Connecticut. So they actually, DEP had a program. It was like a 21J program where they actually subsidized a little amount. I mean, you know, if you throw $500 at my dad and say, "Oh, Dad, you get $500 off," he's all about it. And it was only about, I don't know, $3,000 or something like that. And I had to take him through why, you know, even if he has a sump pump, he's got a sump in the basement, groundwater, the whole thing. So it took a little while, but I honestly think the double wall tank for residential owners is the way to go. And there ought to be much more information about that. That ought to be right next up front with this opting into the insurance. So that would be my take on the whole thing.
Oh, sorry, Paul. Carol, was that a rebate program? That's so some money toward the replacement?
I'm not, when the contractor came in, he said that there was like a $1,500,000, some kind of a rebate. Now I don't think my dad got the rebate. I think the installer got it, but I'm not exactly sure how that worked. And it was a really nice, it wasn't stainless steel, but it was, like a Roth tank, I think it's aluminum. I don't think but it's double walled, and they, make sure there's the connection from the, fuel oil tank to the furnace, and it's up to code and all that. So it's just I don't know why everybody isn't just, after, and then someone asked me, well, how old should the tank be? I said, I don't know. It's insurance, it's $3,000 insurance policy that you don't have to worry about. So I don't really know how the program works. I don't know. This was a year ago, so I don't know if it's still there or whatever, but that's the kind of thing that would motivate people, even if you gave them $500. Why are we subsidizing Mobil Oil, ExxonMobil and BP, and with millions of dollars in the 21J fund? We can't give homeowners like, I don't know, $50 off a tank or $100 off a tank. That's a bigger problem to me.
Paul?
That's my soapbox. I'm done.
Well, I would push your soapbox or build it up a little bit higher. In that, what I'm seeing in my new position is a lot more of the work that DEP is doing on energy efficiency and reducing carbon footprint, and there are discussions of programs and different ways of trying to move people away from oil. So replacing the tank with a double wall tank is one way. Replacing the oil heat with some form of electric heat or heat pump is probably something where you'd be more likely to see some sort of subsidies to get people off the fossil fuels entirely. And kind of improve the carbon footprint as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But there's situations where you just can't do it, or people can't afford it. Given the choice between their whole new heating system.
The electric is very expensive.
Yeah, super expensive
to install.
So I just think you need to go all at it.
My son's house is in a 1960s era street that doesn't have gas. He doesn't want to have oil, and when he bought the house, it has electric heat with a heat pump, which really doesn't work that well in the winter. So they wear sweaters. But he looked into, I guess, the new heat pump systems, and the panels on the roof are good, but it was going to cost a lot of money to redo the whole system. So he's, that's a future thing. It's expensive.
Yeah. Expensive, but that is where a lot of money is going these days.
His father ought to help him out with that.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, an insurance rider for people who do have oil heat and don't want to spend a lot of money and don't have a lot of other options are always less than $100 a year.
Yeah. Very, very affordable.
Yeah. So, as painful as it is for us to kind of read those stories in the Globe or see them on TV, as Liz said, the recent spate of stories has appeared to create an increase of people looking for that insurance. So, that has had a good effect, and to the extent that other people, including legislators, notice that, I think it helps. Hopefully, I'm going to be on Wendy's side of not being quite as cynical as Elliot, and I think there's hope for that.
Been beat up too much.
It'll be nice to see a change happen on this topic before we all retire. That's for sure. I know that, that with the regional staff, the ER staff especially, this is the hardest, some of the hardest work they do in dealing with homeowners. And I'm sure it's the same for LSPs that are working with homeowners.
Yeah, and one thing I think to emphasize, and you guys all probably realize, is I think in reading the article in the Globe, there was surprisingly little mention of DEP, which has its good points and bad points. But it wasn't clear, and I haven't had a chance to look into it in any more detail, the extent to which there had been conversations with DEP, either with the LSP or the homeowners on that. But I would reemphasize that if you're working with homeowners and there are, major costs involved, and particularly, elevating houses to scoop out soil, there are things like financial inability and other ways that perhaps DEP can help mitigate things, at least temporarily. So always, feel free to call it. I know because the ER staff in particular, but the regional staff in general are concerned about it. It's really hard for them. They're very concerned about the effect that contamination has on homeowners across the board. That we're always willing to help work to the extent that we can, within the framework of the regulations.
I would hope they could come up with a solution other than mass excavation and jacking up the house.
That was my initial reaction reading that, but again, I don't know the details, so I don't know whether that was right or wrong, as a long-term strategy or as a short-term strategy. But it would have probably been a good thing to talk to DEP.
Agreed.
Yeah, that was some of the reaction we heard from our staff, is concern of whether or not that was necessary, and whether that might have been driven, by wanting to avoid an AUL ultimately, or what was playing into that. So.
Yeah, and to Carol's point, I like trying to get, in front of the major issue, then trying to deal and rely on insurance. Let's get these homeowners some incentive to replace the tanks. That would be in best interest of everybody. I really like that approach, but time will tell.
Yeah.
I put I put a program in the chat, but it expired on December 31st.
Oh.
It's for a wide range of energy upgrades, including boilers and hot water healers, heaters, and various things for tanks. I do note that in some other jurisdictions, the dealers associations have clubbed together and put a pool of money together that allow people to apply, and their members go out and encourage people to do replacements and have subsidized until the fund runs out.
And if I can chime in, not to keep hanging on the fuel oil thing, but one alternative is kind of thinking of it the same way that Title V works with septic systems, is thinking that this is a critical building system that needs to be evaluated, and at least at the time of a transaction, you can't sell a house with a septic system unless it's been properly inspected by a licensed inspector. And this is again a legislative approach, but it might be, hey, you know what? If you're going to sell and transact a home, or maybe refinance, it has to have been inspected properly, and someone could say, part of that inspection could be that a system that's of a certain age is past its qualified life and needs to be replaced. Certainly that's a way to link it into a transaction when large sums of money are exchanging hands, and the added cost of a couple $1,000s of a new tank might be minor relative to the overall transaction.
Yeah, I agree. And there's if you think about it as, what would you as an environmental professional kind of want to look at if you were buying a new home? And, 25 years ago when I bought my house, top on the list was nothing that had asbestos in it. B, further down the list was really not a preference for oil. I don't want an oil tank, either, past or present. And, those were my top two. Three was, don't buy a house with a septic system, get on, municipal sewer. And then 4, water, prefer not having a well. I want my water tested periodically by professionals. And you would almost think that would be a package put together. We already have the rules for the septic systems, but those are kind of major things that We know to do it as environmental professionals, to at least look at it, evaluate it, maybe not rule it out entirely, but yeah, it's probably a good idea for a lot of people, and they don't realize it.
David, I think you were part of the LSPA legislative meeting where we talked about what could we do for the insurance companies that would make a program like this more attractive. And one of the things was to say, pick a number of years, 10 years, 15 years, regardless its condition. If it is more than 10 or 15 years old, if you want to get insurance, you've got to replace it. I mean, you know, and maybe that would make it more palatable to the insurance companies because they're only going to be insuring systems that should be in good condition.
The thing that they objected to back then was that it was mandatory. It wasn't that they were going to lose money on it, because we looked at how many spills there were a year and what the average cost was, and they weren't going to lose money on it. They didn't like the fact it was mandatory.
But it should be mandatory.
Well, but that's why they opposed it.
But as I'm saying, maybe the carrot and the stick is you offer them that they're only going to be forced to insure systems that are relatively new.
And the point about the inspector, we looked at that too. And you know, who is the qualified inspector? You would think it was going to be the fire department. Fire department don't have enough people to do that. And then it got back to the home heating oil dealer would be a qualified person, but some people don't use big dealers. They get, you know, whatever discounted oil supplier they can get. So there wasn't a good answer as to who was going to be the inspector. So I think the language about who was going to inspect it came out of the bill, but it was an issue that didn't have a good answer back then.
I think it is still linked to having to have the oil safety valve or the
Yes.
Yeah.
extra sleeve.
There's a backflow valve. There's two, and the line from the tank to the furnace has to be double walled. Because that's where a lot of the leaks occurred, because in the old days, they'd put that line under the floor slab and you wouldn't even know it was rotting away.
There was a whole area of Needham that failed all at once. It was code that they had to build this whole neighborhood with a line under the slab, and they all corroded at about the same time. And I had one.
Where was that?
Is that way near where you are, Lale?
I don't.
No, Jillian?
I think that's what prompted the project provisions of the MCP to kind of group those all together.
I thought it was Framingham that had the big problem.
Natick. Wasn't it the
It was
Weathersfield area of Natick? I think it was the
Carol would
Weathersfield
know
there.
that.
I'd have to talk to Bob. I don't know about it. No, I think there was a cluster. There were a cluster of homes in Natick that they just, yeah, there was a whole bunch of oil leaks.
Weathersfield area off of Route 9.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, over time, the number of these releases every year has dropped, but it's still kind of sticky at about 100 a year. So,
that's a lot.
It is.
And it's 100 painful ones. Really, really painful.
That's what I was going to say, especially if you're one of the 100.
As I recall, it wasn't really even concentrated in urban areas. I mean, I remember the Cape had bad situations because some of the tanks were outside and you get the sandy soils, and so the tanks would corrode quickly, and then the releases were very serious.
Yeah, it is spread across all the regions, kind of proportionally to the rest of the number of sites they have.
Did I miss, was there an update on when the MCP's coming out?
Oh, Elliot, you got to come in the beginning.
The update was the status has not changed as of yet.
Oh, sorry.
As are we.
Hey, Liz and Paul, I have a question sort of going back to, we started out talking about, you know, the difficulties of hiring and positions at DEP. And I think a while ago you sort of gave us an update of, you know, which waste site cleanup leadership roles have transitioned to either new people or people acting in that position. Could you do a refresh on that? Because it's not like updated online on any of the, you know, contact information that you can get to publicly that I could find. So could you just go through and say, you know, where are we with, you know, with the DRDs for waste site cleanup and you know, I know you created PFAS groups and those have leaders and stuff, because I just was curious and couldn't find all that information anywhere.
Yeah, so with respect to the DRDs, the only update that has occurred recently is Gerard Martin in the Southeast region moved over to the Bureau of Water Resources. So he's a DRD in that role, and John Handerhan is the acting DRD in the Southeast region. A couple of the offices have created specific PFAS units. That's in Central Region and Western Region. And I don't know offhand if I can tell you who's in charge of those now. Kevin Doust in Central Region, who was the Emergency Response Section Chief, is now moved. I believe he is now in charge of that unit, and it may also include brownfields and other risk reduction type functions in Central Region. And Western Region, I think, is in the process of hiring. They lost a few people recently to retirement. So they have John Ziegler is still in charge of audits out there. Sadi Motamedi is in charge of the Brownfields program. And he may also be, that may also be the unit that does the PFAS work out there. Who am I missing? Northeast, I think everyone in terms of Steve Johnson, DRD, section chiefs remain the same. They have done some hiring of new staff. I know they added a few emergency responders in the last couple of months. So Paul, do you, anything I missed? Oh, in the Boston office. So Lisa Alexander, who was the audit coordinator, retired back in October. We're in the process of hiring for that position. We now have a statewide emergency response coordinator. That's a position that hadn't been filled for a few years, and Kathy Kiley has moved into that position. Kathy had worked in as a contract administrator, and she did a lot of the natural resource damages grant contracting, as well as our lab contract. She managed that. She managed several things. So we're now in the process of hiring for that contract administrator position in Boston. Those are some of the big ones. We also hope to hire more project managers for the federal sites program. And we also have posted a brownfields coordinator position. That's another one that hadn't been filled for a few years. And it also had at one point been down in the commissioner's office, and we brought that back into the waste site cleanup program. And I think application process just closed for that. So we'll be moving into setting up interviews for that position.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would add, I think you didn't get into the Southeast region's PFAS group, which is headed by Angela Gallagher.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
She has a couple staff working with her.
Thanks. It's good to know what folks you're looking for and what positions you're still looking to fill or whatever.
Marilyn, can you tell me what you were looking at that is out of date? We can look into updating that? Or,
I think you know, if you go to the webpage and you go to one of the regional offices and look for contacts, I think some of the, you know, like some of the subject matter experts and leadership team people are people. It still lists the people that have retired, or it's hard to find who's replaced them. So I don't know how frequently that contacts page gets
okay.
updated or revised.
Well, we'll take a look at those, and we probably haven't revised the ones that have Liz's name or my name on it either, because we thought we'd be back by now.
Right.
Well, yeah, and you had such a batch of you know, through the pandemic, such a batch of retirements that, you know, it's probably
The retirement, I get to see this from a slightly different perspective now, and the retirements have hit the department really hard over the past year. You know, in wayside cleanup, but also in the perhaps more so in the other programs, and the number of there are a number of positions that are out there. If you have staff if you have people that you know, friends, relatives, people you're mentoring coming out of college that are interested in working in the public sector, first, you know, we would be more than happy to talk with them and give a sales pitch for why they should work at DEP. You know, feel free to send them my name to do that. But also, you know, there are the Commonwealth's website for hiring, which I forget what the name of it is, but there's a link on our website. You can go there and you can filter for the Department of Environmental Protection and get a list of the positions that we have open at any given time. And there's probably now, you know, I would bet if I went there now, there'd be at least a dozen positions open for DEP. Yeah. And that has created a lot of a lot of time and effort is being spent in the hiring process for all of us who are not used to doing it. So it's a learning experience, and it's great to hire people. It's and have new people. It's painful to go through the process, but we're all doing that. The downside of it is that even though we're hiring a lot of people, these are not new positions for the most part. We've gotten a handful of positions to address PFAS over the past year or two, and those have been new. But what you're seeing now is mostly a result of retirements and the subsequent backfills that might happen if we replace people with internal hires. So it's not necessarily a net gain, and we're operating pretty much at probably a 30 FTE deficit right now, trying to catch up to that. And I say that because it's in contrast to kind of what EPA, because they are now gearing up for hiring or have started hiring in response to the ARPA money and the infrastructure bill that are beginning to be implemented. So there is money kind of working its way through the system, and we're competing with EPA for EPA is putting out new positions and new hires, and we're trying to catch up to where we were just a couple of years ago, filling our old positions. And hopefully the new money might mean new positions for us, but that's there's process and bureaucracy and everything involved in that, so that it's not clear at the moment. But there are positions out there. It's a great place to work. There's a lot of exciting things that are being done, and we'd love for all of you to recommend people. And if you're approaching the end of your career in the private sector, and it's also a great place to work for a little while and get in on some of the good benefits that come with being a public sector employee. And there are senior positions that would be a good place for people to kind of give back, do some public sector work, and by the way, kind of accrue some some benefits.
You know,
as
Paul, you may want to think about looking into what, I don't know how they did this, but the public health world, if you come out of with a public health degree and you go and work for any local board of health or state health department, you get forgiveness on your loan, or at least some reduction in the loans. And that's driven a lot of young people to come in for, and you have to do minimum 2 years. So we get a lot of people in the health department coming through doing 2 or 3 years and then ending up staying in it because of the loan forgiveness. I mean, if there's a way you can work it, they've been doing that for years in the public health world. So that's one thought. And the other thing is, I don't know if you guys, are you going to the UMass conference? Of course, it's virtual, but there's a lot of job fair there. Do you have a job fair booth? I think you usually do, right?
We usually do, and we have staff who are, and actually now a new work group that is looking at recruiting and kind of what we can do better for that.
Yeah, just go to the universities or go to the conferences that are at the universities, maybe.
Yeah, part of the problem, of course, is you probably realize, because you're in the private sector and we're not, is that there are some things that's very hard for us to compete on. We can compete on benefits. We have very good benefits. Salary, maybe not necessarily as much.
I think the loan forgiveness is huge. I mean, they had to look into that. Even if it takes 2 years to get it, I mean, that, it's totally worth it. It drives the younger people into the profession, and at least it gives them, 2 or 3 years in the sector, which is really important to understand. I will say firsthand, I'm really glad I worked at DEP.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think one change we have made in the last 2 years is is this right, Paul? We now are paying our interns where we hadn't previously.
Yep. We now have a paid internship program that happens 3 times a year, I think. And we found that we have been able to, people who have gone through our internship program and that have applied for positions at DEP are certainly have that added experience, and it benefits them. And we've hired a number of people who have been interns and have been thrilled with how it's worked out.
So anything else? Any other questions? Approaching 10 o'clock.
Liz, do you have, is there any plan or schedule to do another round of TAG grants?
We're looking at that now. So we gave out 3 TAG grants last year. When the contracts were finally put in place, we were already well into the year. So we want to be finishing up those grants before, well, not necessarily before, but we want to be well along in the work being done under those grants before we put out the next TAG solicitation. So I think initially we thought we'd do it annually, and it would be, I think last year we started talking about the TAG grants and setting up the public meeting on it about this time. So that's still, I guess the answer is it's still under discussion. I would like to see us do it again next year and have the timing be, relatively close to how we did it last year. The other thing we've been looking into, I don't know if we've made much progress on it yet, is whether we could possibly run it as a rolling grant, because that might be easier for communities, because I think it takes some time for people to pull things together to get ready to apply for a grant, and the deadline can kind of work against them on that. We're not sure whether or not we can do that the way our TAG regulations are written, but that's one question we're looking into. So the short answer is yes, but the details we're still working out.
Just having gone through this, Liz, I got to tell you that the contract at the end of it is just kind of insane. I mean, it took us 4 months to get a signed contract for what we got in Framingham in September. We're just getting going on it. And now we have a deadline of June. So it compresses the amount of time. So that kind of thing has to get expedited. I don't really know what took
Yeah.
so long.
Yeah, I think exploring doing the tags on a rolling basis would work out. Also thinking of a similar thing for the Mossberg grants. Kind of throw that out there. But it's another grant program that we instituted last year and trying to have it go on an annual basis or on a rolling basis.
Okay, well, if there's nothing else, thanks everyone for joining us. Next month, I think we actually have a Wayside Cleanup Advisory Committee. I know we just met in January, but because of avoiding the month of December for our meetings, that has our next quarterly meeting following next month. So hope to see you there.
Maybe we'll have a presentation on the new MCP.
That would make us all very happy. Yeah.
I said maybe. See, Paul, I'm not always cynical.
No.
The glass is half full.
And we have an opportunity to at least kind of expedite part of its senior management review. So I'm committed to signing off the day I get it. So we'll see.
We wish you all luck.
Yep.
Be well.
Thanks, Liz and
Okay.
Paul.
Bye,
All right, thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.